You think $1 billion inheritance would bring a family closer? Mine used it as a reason to throw me out on the street. The day my parents got $1.1 billion was the day I learned what betrayal truly feels like. My name is Kasha, and I want to share exactly how it all happened. It started in a sterile lawyer's office, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound besides my heartbeat. My parents, Roland and Diana, sat on either side of me, smiling nervously, waiting for the reading of my grandfather's will. I remembered him as a quiet man, always generous to me, living humbly in his small cabin. I never imagined he had a secret fortune. Then Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, spoke the words that changed everything. My grandfather was a billionaire. The entire $1.1 billion was left to my parents. At first, I couldn't breathe. Their faces transformed from disbelief to pure ecstasy. Tears streamed down their cheeks as they hugged each other, celebrating a life I had never imagined. And me? I felt invisible, like someone standing in the shadows while a light shone on everyone else. Their eyes met mine briefly, not with love, not with shared excitement, but with a cold, calculating distance. I was no longer their daughter. I was a bystander to their newfound fortune. The changes were immediate. My father quit his job with a smug sense of entitlement. My mother threw herself into designer labels and luxury goods, treating the house like a showroom. I still worked at the library, a place I loved, yet every effort I made to contribute felt insignificant. My mother would dismiss my help with a flick of her manicured nails. My father would shake his head, muttering that I embarrassed them. The house that once felt like home became a museum of wealth and disdain. The breaking point came one Tuesday. I returned home from work to find my life thrown into the driveway. Books soaked in rain, clothes strewn across the yard. My parents stood at the door, calm and resolute. "We're listing the house," my father said. "Our new estate doesn't have room for you." My mother added, "It's time you made your own way. Don't call us." Just like that, the people who had raised me, who had told me I mattered, reduced me to nothing. That night, I slept in my car, feeling the weight of rejection crush me. My life had been upended, and the family I loved had abandoned me. But even in that darkness, I remembered one thing my grandfather had always told me. Resilience is the true inheritance. And it was a lesson I would soon put to the ultimate test. From betrayal and despair, my journey had begun, a journey that would teach me strength, cunning, and the meaning of real power. The moment the news hit, everything changed. My parents didn't even wait for the money to arrive before their behavior shifted. My father, Roland, called his office once, and the venom in his voice made it clear he was done with the job. My mother, Diana, suddenly dressed in the most expensive clothes, piling jewelry on top, as if every shiny thing could show her new status. Our quiet suburban home transformed into a display of wealth. Luxury bags on the sofas, boxes of shoes stacked in every corner, and designer labels spilling from every closet. It no longer felt like a home. It felt like a museum of money. I still went to work at the library, a job I had once loved. It was the one part of life that felt normal, but even that began to feel strange. Whenever I tried to pay my share of the bills, my mother would flick the check away like it was nothing. "Why bother with this trivia, Kasha? We're beyond this," she said, her tone sharp, her nails tapping against the counter. My father didn't even speak most of the time. He would just shake his head, a look of disappointment that cut deeper than any words, muttering, "You're embarrassing us." Even small things became unbearable. Conversations revolved around showing off, comparing brands, and flaunting status. The warmth that had once filled the house disappeared. My parents' smiles never reached their eyes anymore. It was all performance, all pride. I tried to fit in, tried to act like I was part of this new world, but I always felt like an outsider. Every laugh, every glance, every casual remark from them reminded me that I wasn't enough for their new life. I kept thinking back to how things used to be, when money didn't mean anything, when a simple dinner or a shared joke made us happy. Now, those memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. I worked longer hours at the library just to escape the tension at home, spending nights sorting books or cataloging new arrivals. The house felt suffocating, filled with things but empty of love. I realized that nothing I did would make them see me the way I used to matter to them. Their minds were consumed by wealth and appearance, leaving no room for care, respect, or even simple kindness. I was invisible in plain sight, treated as a trivial part of their new life. Every day, I watched them spiral deeper into greed and pride, and I understood something I hadn't before. The money had changed them completely, and it was a change I could neither stop nor reverse. The library became my sanctuary, a quiet space where the world made sense again, even if only for a few hours each day. I began to learn that surviving in this house meant staying quiet, keeping my feelings hidden, and finding small ways to preserve the part of me that they seemed determined to erase. It was only the beginning of a long, lonely descent into a life I never wanted, and yet one I had no choice but to endure. Every day felt heavier than the last. The contempt for my parents became part of the routine. Meals were no longer a time to share or laugh. They were filled with thinly veiled insults. My father and mother found endless ways to point out my failings, always comparing me to people they admired or imagined were more successful. They never asked about my life or how I felt. Instead, they reminded me constantly of how unambitious I was, how I had wasted opportunities, and how I didn't measure up to their new standards. They spoke of the past as if I had no role in it, claiming every achievement, every moment of hard work I'd done, had been made possible only because they had paid for my education. The truth was far different. I was still paying off student loans, struggling with debt I had taken on myself. But nothing I said or proved could shake their narrative. My efforts, my sacrifices, my very existence in their eyes had become a burden. Then one Tuesday, it all ended. I walked up the driveway after a long shift at the library, expecting the usual tension, maybe a few sharp words. What I found instead was devastation. My books were soaked, warping in a puddle, and my clothes were scattered across the driveway, torn and muddied. My home, the place that should have offered safety and comfort, looked like a battlefield, and I was the casualty. My parents stood in the doorway, calm and indifferent, as if they were delivering news that required no emotion. My father's voice was flat, lacking even the pretense of care. "We're listing the house," he said. "We've purchased an estate. It doesn't have a room for you." My mother's words followed, cold and final. "It's time you made your own way. Don't call us." There was no discussion, no chance for explanation, no glimmer of love or understanding. Just an unspoken message that I no longer belonged, that my presence was no longer wanted. I stood there, stunned, my mind struggling to process the reality. They weren't angry, they weren't upset. They were simply finished with me. Everything I had known, every memory of family life, was replaced in an instant with rejection. It wasn't just about losing a home. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to protect and care for me had chosen wealth over their own child. The weight of their actions pressed down, leaving me hollow and disoriented. I felt abandoned, betrayed, and utterly alone. That day marked a turning point. It was the moment I understood that nothing would come from pleading or hoping for their love. I had to face the world alone, carry the pain of their rejection, and find a way to survive without the family I had once trusted. It was the breaking point, the moment when everything I had known about safety, loyalty, and family shattered before my eyes. I spent that first night in my car with the seat pushed back as far as it could go. The air felt cold and heavy, and every sound in the parking lot made me jump. I kept telling myself it was only for one night, but deep down I knew things wouldn't get better quickly. When the sun came up, I washed my face in a gas station restroom and went straight to work, pretending everything was normal. At the library, I tried to stay busy so no one would notice the emptiness inside me. I signed up for every overnight inventory shift, even the ones no one wanted. It wasn't for extra pay. I just needed a place to stay warm and safe. The quiet aisles and dim lights became my shelter, a place where I could hide from the world. I walked through the rows of books like a ghost, avoiding conversations, avoiding eye contact, avoiding anything that would remind me of what I had lost. Days blurred into nights. I kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking only brought pain. I eventually checked into a small pay-by-the-week motel. The room was cramped, the walls thin, and the old air conditioner rattled through the night. Still, it was better than sleeping in my car, and it gave me a place to cry without anyone hearing. My 30th birthday came during that time. No calls, no messages, no family. I bought myself a single cupcake from a convenience store because I didn't want the day to pass without something marking it. I lit the candle, watched the tiny flame dance for a moment, and quietly blew it out. The silence afterward felt heavier than the room itself. There was no laughter, no singing, no one saying my name. Just me sitting on the edge of a cheap bed, staring at the empty space in front of me. The tears started softly, but grew until I couldn't hold them back. It wasn't only sadness that overwhelmed me. It was the deep shame of where I had ended up. I felt pushed into a corner I couldn't escape from. Everything I thought I knew about family, love, and security had been ripped away, and all that remained was the harsh truth of my situation. Later that night, I caught my reflection in the dark motel window. I didn't see strength or hope. I saw a tired, broken woman who had hit a wall so hard it knocked the breath out of her. And there was no one else to blame, no one else to call, no one else to help. It was just me, facing myself, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. That moment was rock bottom. Not because I had nothing, but because I finally realized I had no one. And somehow, I had to find a way to rise from that place alone. In the middle of everything falling apart, I kept thinking back to the life I once had. Before all the chaos, I lived in a small apartment of my own. It wasn't anything special, but it was peaceful. I paid my rent on time, cooked simple meals, and enjoyed the quiet. I didn't have much, but it was mine. I had a routine, a sense of control, and a little freedom. All of that disappeared the night my phone rang. The call came out of nowhere, filled with panic. My father had suffered a heart attack, and my mother didn't know what to do. Without even thinking twice, I left everything behind and rushed to their house. I didn't stop to ask questions or consider the cost. I just knew they needed me. Once I arrived, the reality hit me. My father was weak, barely able to move or speak. My mother, though scared, had no idea how to manage his care. Without being asked, I stepped in. I called the doctors, went through the medical reports, and made sure he got the treatment he needed. I became the one everyone depended on. I moved back home completely, packing up my apartment and giving up the life I had built. Each day began with preparing his medications, checking his blood pressure, and helping him sit up. I fed him slowly, spoonful by spoonful, because his hands trembled too much. The hospital bills piled up quickly, and I used my savings to keep everything afloat. Every dollar I had worked for went into keeping him alive. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for help. I believed I was doing the right thing. I thought that if I stayed strong, if I cared for them the way family is supposed to care for each other, things would eventually get better between us. I hoped my sacrifice would remind them of the bond we once had. Months passed, and my life faded into the background. I stopped going out, stopped meeting friends, stopped thinking about my own needs. My world shrank to doctor appointments, late-night monitoring, and long hours sitting beside him while he slept. I was exhausted, but I kept going because I loved him, because I believed family meant something. But instead of gratitude or warmth, all I received was dismissal. My efforts were brushed aside like they were nothing. They acted as if I had no choice, as if caring for him was simply expected, not appreciated. The independence I had once been proud of suddenly seemed invisible to them. They saw my sacrifice not as love, but as weakness. They acted like I had nowhere else to be, like my life didn't exist outside their needs. And slowly, painfully, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. I had given up everything to keep the family together, but they didn't see the value in any of it. I had saved them, yet somehow, in their eyes, I was still the one who had nothing. I spent hours trying to dry out my old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. The pages were soggy, the cover peeling, and the smell of damp paper filled the room. This wasn't just any book. It was the one my grandfather had given me, the one I had carried with me through every move, every low moment, every lonely night. Holding it now, ruined and soft in my hands, felt like losing a piece of him all over again. As I pried the cover open, something unusual caught my eye. The binding had split more than usual, and inside the hollowed-out spine, I found a small metallic object. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it out. It was a key, old but polished, smooth from years of handling. Alongside it was a folded piece of paper. My grandfather's handwriting, the careful, elegant letters I had memorized, was on it. I unfolded the note slowly, trying not to let my shaking hands tear it. It read, "For my Kasha. When the wolves show their teeth, use this. First National, Safety Deposit Box 217. The code is your birthday." The words were simple, but they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Wolves showing their teeth. It was like he had known everything before it even happened. He had predicted the greed, the betrayal, the coldness from the people who were supposed to love me. The key felt heavier in my hand than its small size should allow. I traced the edges with my fingers, imagining the lock it would fit, the secret it would open. My mind raced. Could this be the way out of everything I had lost? Could my grandfather have left me a chance, a path to safety, to something that belonged to me alone? For the first time in months, a a spark of hope lit inside me. It was fragile, easily extinguished by the memories of my parents' betrayal and the months of struggle I had endured. But it was there, undeniable, a small glimmer in the darkness that had felt endless. I realized that he hadn't abandoned me. He had prepared me. I held the key tightly, imagining myself walking into a bank, unlocking a safety deposit box, and finding something that would change everything. I didn't know what was inside, but somehow, I trusted him completely. Everything my parents had taken, every insult, every dismissal, every moment I had felt powerless, it seemed possible that all of it could be turned around. That night, as I carefully wrapped the key and note back in the book, I felt a mix of fear and determination. The wolves were still out there, circling, ready to pounce, but now I had a tool, a clue, a way to take control. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. My grandfather's voice, his care, his guidance, all whispered through his handwriting. Use this, Kasha. You can face what comes next. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. I arrived at the bank with the small key clenched tightly in my hand, my heart pounding so loudly I thought the tellers could hear it. The box number was etched in my mind, the code memorized down to the last digit. Every step felt like walking toward a future I could hardly imagine, a mixture of hope and fear twisting in my chest. When I finally turned the key and opened the safety deposit box, my hands trembled. I had expected something simple, maybe cash, maybe jewelry, but what I found was different. Inside lay a sealed letter and a small, black hard drive, its surface unmarked except for a few etched numbers. No piles of money, no flashy treasures, just these two objects, quiet and unassuming, yet carrying a weight far heavier than any fortune. I unfolded the letter carefully, recognizing my grandfather's handwriting immediately. As I read, a mix of shock and awe swept over me. He explained that he had seen the truth of my parents long before any of this happened. He had predicted their greed, their obsession with wealth, and the way they would cast me aside once their fortune was within reach. Everything they had done, every insult and betrayal, had been part of the test he had set for them. The letter continued, but my eyes kept drifting to the hard drive. According to his note, it held the real inheritance, the full plans, patent filings, and designs for his greatest creation, a revolutionary geothermal energy cell that could change the world. Unlike money, which could be wasted or stolen, this was a tool, a foundation for something lasting, something real. My grandfather hadn't left me easy wealth. He had left me the means to build my own empire, to create a legacy on my own terms. I stared at the hard drive, imagining what it could become. The technology inside could power cities, transform industries, and bring energy to places that had never had it. I realized then that my grandfather had trusted me, not to inherit money, but to inherit responsibility, ingenuity, and the chance to do something extraordinary. The letter confirmed it. He believed I had the strength and intelligence to succeed where others had failed. For the first time in months, a sense of purpose filled me. Everything I had endured, the rejection, the loneliness, the betrayal, suddenly had a meaning I hadn't seen before. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a plan, a tool, and the knowledge that my success would come from my own hard work, not from handouts or the whims of those who had abandoned me. Clutching the hard drive and the letter, I felt a quiet determination grow inside me. This was the turning point. My grandfather had given me more than wealth. He had given me a path to greatness. And now it was up to me to follow it, to take control of my life, and to build something no one could ever take away. The real inheritance wasn't money. It was the power to change my destiny. I couldn't waste any time. The moment I held the hard drive, I knew that success wouldn't come by waiting or hoping. I needed focus, determination, and a plan. My grandfather had left me the tools, and now it was up to me to use them. The anger, the betrayal, the months of struggle, all of it became fuel. I felt a cold, quiet resolve settle inside me, pushing me forward. The first step was understanding the technology. I hadn't worked as an engineer in years, and most of my degree had been tucked away in memory, gathering dust. But as I pored over the schematics and patents, my old knowledge returned piece by piece. The complexity of the designs challenged me, but I welcomed it. Every calculation, every diagram I deciphered brought me closer to the reality my grandfather had envisioned. Next came finding a place to begin. I couldn't afford a fancy lab or an office in a high-rise building. Instead, I found a small, gritty warehouse tucked away in an industrial part of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. With the patent as collateral, I secured a modest loan, just enough to cover the rent, equipment, and initial supplies. I didn't have the luxury of wasting money, but I had everything I needed to start. Hiring people was a careful process. I didn't want anyone with flashy resumes or family connections. I needed integrity, talent, and dedication. Slowly, I built a small crew, a handful of engineers and technicians who shared my vision and were willing to work quietly, without expecting fame or recognition. We kept to the shadows, avoiding unnecessary attention while we pieced together the first prototype. Every day was long and exhausting. Weeks blurred into months, filled with calculations, trials, and endless adjustments. Failures were frequent, but each one taught me something new. I worked alongside my team, not as a distant boss, but as someone who knew every detail, every challenge, every risk. We pushed forward relentlessly, building something that wasn't just functional. It was revolutionary. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It wasn't about proving my worth to my parents or anyone else. It was about creating something lasting, something my grandfather would have been proud of. The warehouse, the long nights, the sacrifices, they all had a purpose. Slowly, quietly, I felt myself rising, building not just a prototype, but the foundation of an empire. And in that silent ascent, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I was truly in control of my destiny. A year and a half passed since I first unlocked the secrets my grandfather had left me. Every day had been a test of patience, skill, and determination. Late nights, endless adjustments, and countless obstacles had become routine, but I never wavered. Finally, the moment arrived. Solis Energy was ready to launch. The debut was beyond anything I could have imagined. The technology worked flawlessly, and its potential to change the energy world captured immediate attention. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Headlines spread quickly. Reclusive billionaire's granddaughter changes the future of energy, or young engineer unveils revolutionary geothermal power. People were fascinated not just by the invention, but by the story behind it. How a woman who had been cast aside by her family had quietly built something the world needed. I didn't reach out to my parents. I didn't need to. Their absence in my life had become a relief. Still, news of my success reached them sooner or later, as such things do. Meanwhile, the consequences of their own choices were becoming painfully clear. Their fortune, once a shining symbol of wealth and power, was collapsing. Senseless spending, reckless investments, and blind trust in people who turned out to be opportunists had drained almost everything. Their new friends had disappeared the moment they needed support, leaving my parents vulnerable and exposed. Every article, every report, every social media post about my success seemed to shine a light on their failures. It was not revenge I sought. It was justice in the form of reality. The world now saw the truth that I had lived with quietly for years. The people who had abandoned me were not as untouchable as they had believed. Their wealth had given them power for a short while, but it couldn't protect them from the consequences of their choices. Solis Energy wasn't just a company. It was proof that I could rise above the betrayal and build something lasting from the ruins of my past. Investors were eager, partners were impressed, and the technology promised a brighter, more sustainable future. I had gone from a powerless, discarded daughter to someone whose name carried weight in industries I had only dreamed of impacting. I watched from a distance as my parents struggled to regain control over a life they had thought was theirs to dominate. There were no dramatic confrontations, no angry phone calls, just the slow, inevitable collapse of everything they had taken for granted. Their lavish lifestyle, their sense of superiority, their belief that money alone could define them, it all crumbled quietly and completely. Through it all, I remained focused on my work and my vision. The success of Solis Energy was more than a business achievement. It was a statement. It proved that resilience, intelligence, and integrity mattered more than inherited wealth or superficial status. And while the world celebrated my rise, the shadow of my parents' downfall served as a stark reminder that choices and character define our true legacy. Months after Solis Energy's launch, they appeared at my office. My parents looked tired, their clothes no longer the flashy designer labels I remembered. Their faces carried the weight of disappointment, worry, and humiliation. They didn't demand anything, didn't raise their voices, and didn't make excuses. There was no anger in my chest either, only a steady calm and a clarity I had never felt before. My mother's voice trembled as she spoke, fragile and uncertain. "We were wrong," she admitted, her words small and hesitant, almost swallowed by the empty space around us. My father remained silent, his eyes lowered, the arrogance that had once filled him gone. It was strange to see them like this. People I had known as confident and untouchable reduced to mere shadows of themselves. I looked at them carefully. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to lecture or punish. Instead, a sense of pity settled over me, deep and unshakable. I had endured betrayal, humiliation, and abandonment, yet I had grown beyond it. I had built something meaningful, something enduring, something no one could take from me. My life was no longer defined by their actions, but by my own choices and efforts. I know you were, I said quietly, my voice calm, carrying no threat or malice. But your journey is your own. I can't help you. Those words weren't cruel. They were a statement of truth. I had learned that success, respect, and independence cannot be given. They must be earned, and I had earned mine. Their mistakes and failures could not pull me back. They stood there unsure, perhaps hoping for a different response, but I turned away. The office doors closed behind me with a quiet finality, not as a barrier to the past, but as a gateway to the future I had built for myself. Every step I took inside my building reminded me that this life, this achievement, was mine alone. No one had created it for me, and no one could take it away. For the first time, I felt completely free. The past, the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness, was behind me, and ahead stretched a life of my own making. I had proven to myself that strength and perseverance mattered more than inherited wealth or superficial approval. I had survived, and I had thrived. In that moment, I understood something essential. Closure doesn't come from revenge or confrontation. It comes from building a life so strong and complete that the past, no matter how cruel, has no hold over you. My parents' words mattered little now, because I had already taken everything I needed from life: the ability to stand tall, to create, and to live fully on my own terms. The unbroken circle wasn't about family forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about me reclaiming my power, proving to myself that I could rise above betrayal, and stepping fully into a future I had built entirely alone, yet stronger than ever. Do you think Kasia was right to never help her parents after everything they did? Or should she have given them a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe with the notification bell for more stories like this.